Hello, my name's Niranjan, the host of Master of Your Crafts podcast, learning from leaders who are continuously inspired, passionate, and driven to align with their soul purpose, sharing their gifts to bring healing to others. The music is composed by Rebecca Everett. Today is episode number 39, and I'll be talking to Shahram Shokrian, an Iranian-American multidisciplinary artist born and raised in Los Angeles. Shahram studied at the School of Art Institute of Chicago with a focus on digital art, painting, and sculpture. His work was inspired by surrealism, symbolism, and science with a focus on genetics and the role they play in our future. Shahram has worked on national and global campaigns for Apple, Adidas, Nike, Google, Spotify, and Visa, just to name a few, and is now creating works in the NFT space. So hello and welcome to Shahram. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'm excited to have you on the show to learn a little bit more about you because I came across you on Clubhouse. What you shared in that messaging was very intriguing from a creative aspect, but also then learning that you are very much an artist on many platforms, not only from your ceramic art, but also from the surrealism of life and the world and how you incorporate that into what you do. Would you like to share a little bit for the audience about what is it you do and how it possibly even defines you into who you are?
I didn't really know too much about what surrealism even was at that time. I didn't even know what surrealism was at all, actually. And I had done this oil painting. It was like a 12 by 12 painting. And it was a door in the middle of a desert. And I had these like majestic mountains in the background. And I painted these clouds, which were kind of like two people touching with a moon in the corner. And I was super happy about it. I was like super stoked. I showed my mom, and she had saw it. And she's like, "Oh, you should look at Salvador Dali." I had no idea who he was at the time, and she took me to. We went to the LA County Museum, and I saw a book of his, and I opened it up, and I fell in love. I was mesmerized. I was intrigued. I loved the idea of being in this dreamscape, and it just identified with me so much because I'm really into symbols, and I like things that are pretty much untapped into our unconsciousness, and because I think there's like so much more behind it. Because a lot of times I think we're so much in our own reality, we don't necessarily understand what we absorb and how we absorb things and how we process them. And I think this is like this underlining language of us that we have, that we need to learn and how to communicate with it. I kind of just admired it, and I studied it, and I learned techniques from just looking at the books and his pieces. And I started painting a lot more into that area, almost to the point where I started to realize I kind of was mimicking a lot of his own work and his style. And I had to kind of pull back from that and try and discover my own imagery.
Mm.
Yeah, so I got a computer in '94, and I think I had a copy. It came with a copy of Photoshop at that time, and Photoshop back then was version 2.5. So layers didn't exist. I had one undo, and I had a unlimited canvas in my own eyes, and unlimited colors. And from there, I was like, oh my God, because my bedroom had paint on it from from the walls to the floor. I used my carpet as my cleaning rag for my paintings.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
yeah, I mean, my father wasn't too happy, but I think after I think I spilled paint on it. I was like, oh, screw it, it's gonna be my painting rag. So
Yeah.
so it was like my little playpen. It was also a place where like I would just want to go because growing up, say my father was he was pretty strict. I mean, he was supportive. I mean, I look back now and I realize he was supportive about it. But of course, I think in his eyes, he also wanted me to be a businessman. He's like 87,
Mm.
still goes
Wow.
to work and puts a suit on and sits in
Wow.
his office. I mean, he sleeps, but he sits in his office. And yeah, I went to school in Chicago and I was in a painting class and I was like, nope, I need to explore this digital side because it was so new back then and not many people were into it. And I like being on the forefront of technology because I just absorb all of it. I was like, even reading through like, computer magazines, I was all about like, oh, what's the new technology that's coming out that I need to be on
Mhm.
top of. So yeah, from art school, I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago,
Nice.
which was a pretty predominant school for painting, and I got a scholarship to go there for painting, and I kind of didn't really paint anymore at that point, but I brought it back. Um,
Right.
so yeah, so I brought painting back into with my digital art.
Yeah.
So I was doing a mixture of both.
So fast forward from the years of spilling paint on your carpet, figuring out who the hell Salvador Dali is, and all the surrealisms out there, Max Ernst and all those guys out there. What do you believe about yourself now?
Everything is like starting to come together now. I mean, most of the time I've been working on commercial stuff with my clients and they're big clients, and started out with just my own little company called Independent Digital Artists. And the idea was to kind of have a space for digital artists to work in and to come up with projects and to work on graphic design and web design. And it was seems kind of basic, for just kind of helping businesses out. And
Mhm.
I felt like I should be doing more, but I was still exploring in technology, and I've kind of pulled away from being creative. And that's when I turned 40, I got into ceramics, and because I wanted to kind of jumpstart being like tactile again and kind of working with my hands and exploring back into the art world. I discovered that that I needed to create again. And through that, and thankfully through NFTs now, because now I feel like I have an actual platform where I could sell stuff, and it's not about the motivation of selling. I'm also my biggest collector because I have a lot of artwork. I don't intend to sell. If somebody wanted a piece, I would sometimes pretty much give a piece to somebody because it was, And now I've come to the idea of like, okay, now I just want to share a message. I still want to keep my surrealism. I still want to keep all of that with me. I also exploring a lot of artwork with genetics as well and science.
Mhm.
And I did like 23 paintings of my chromosomes where I went to a laboratory, withdrew my blood, got images of my chromosomes,
Mm.
transferred each pair onto 2 feet by 2 feet canvas. So there's 23 paintings of my chromosomes.
Wow.
And I also did sculptures in that aspect as well. And I talked about how pretty much humans are based on binary information
Mm.
and how our DNA is, binary code. And we're all kind of these running applications in this
Mm.
simulated environment.
Mhm.
These are things that like I've kind of held with me, and the idea of science and who we are and what we are. I started recently doing this, and I've told myself like if you don't think about it, maybe you live longer. But death does come knocking at some point, and it does freak
Right.
me when I think about it. It irks me, and so I kind of like I'm like, okay, just keep living, keep moving, keep doing what you got to do. Time may be running out, but make sure you get your message out and
Yeah.
and make a legacy for yourself. So,
Yeah.
and with that, this piece kind of came about my with my NFTs about focusing on a little bit of that and kind of digging into truths like math, science, and I'm trying to bring that all together and talk about the stages we have in our lives. Because like right now, I feel like I'm in that sixth or seventh stage of our
Mhm.
life. It was based on the 8 stages of our lives.
Yeah. Very interesting. Did you ever think that you would get to this space? Did you preamble that as a kid?
I kind of felt like there was a story that was unfolding or being told, because there was a lot of weird coincidences that happened in my life where I'm like, okay, universe is definitely aligning me with something. So, and with those, I kind of just tuned into them and listened to the universe because I'm very into technology. And a friend of mine who mentioned to me, you should check out these Top Shots because they're collector items, and I've always been a fan of basketball and baseball and hockey, and I used to collect all these cards. So it kind of brought a little nostalgia to me about these collector items. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, yeah, through Clubhouse, like I just started seeing this word NFT popping up. And I'm like, okay, let's dig into this room and hear what it's about. And I felt like everybody discovered it pretty much all around the same time. And then it's just been like a rocket to the moon at this point.
Well, you definitely do have some interesting pieces. I think the one that caught my attention was your golden ratio
Yeah, correct.
piece.
Yeah.
The backstory behind that, which kind of makes sense now you've shared a little bit more about yourself. The whole science, the surrealism, the genetics piece, and then the universal piece of how things will just unfold the way they need to unfold. But yet, there's that conscious and subconscious mind situation that's happening, that there is something greater. And how do we tap into that? From my translation of looking at that piece, is what else is ruminating in and around that space of that golden ratio?
Things divide into themselves, just like the golden ratio, and this pattern that it creates, it's pretty much a infinite idea. I mean, the universe is infinite. It just kind of seems like that's hopefully the path when we do pass. Because time for me, it is man-made. I've done mushrooms, and time slows down tremendously. Sometimes I feel like 5 minutes can be like 2 hours. And when we pass, I'm assuming maybe that, we are indefinitely in our bodies. I've always felt like that, what is Earth? What is the planet? What is the universe? Are we just molecules and floating in a body of the universe? Are we within ourselves? Are we within a greater being? Look at an ant. Like an ant's world is tremendously huge compared to where we are. Dinosaurs were, supposedly a lot bigger than us. So, I mean, there's microorganisms and plant life, and it just gets down to a cellular level. So there's this large scale and large range. So who knows where we are in that range? But I feel like, yeah, we could be ultimately in another being living our own lives. So,
Makes me think about where we are in waking state, going back to dream state, your good friend Salvador Dali
right.
and the good Freud, same thing, dream analysis, all those folks who really delved into that space of Who are we? What are we? What is it we're here to do,
Right.
if anything?
I think that, that's another reason why DNA is such a mystery to us, because it is our ancestry, um, all mixed into one. We have a history within us that we carry. And that's why I sometimes feel like, okay, you have to have a legacy, to kind of just carry on the tradition. Being in the dream state and our reality, I think it's our history kind of coming out. It's our ancestry kind of helping us tell what our path is. And we do make decisions based on things that we relate to. I mean, like, we see identifiers or we see flags, so we're drawn to those things. Um, so, and that's something within us. So we kind of do foretell what our future is like based on our hidden internal knowledge. It's kind of like saying our future is kind of written out, even though we don't know what their future is.
Or we don't remember what the future is.
We don't remember what our future is. Yes, that's an idea as well.
And even what our future is and our knowledge that we have is already embedded in us. So maybe it's an element of looking at that iceberg, seeing the analogy of the iceberg, the top part above the water, which is 10%, is the conscious mind, and the rest of it is the subconscious mind. So maybe it's activating or portions of the subconscious mind to download the information in the conscious mind so we can live it and act it and be it. I see it as it's all just floating out there in the ethers, just ready for us to catch
Yeah.
on a vibrational level and on a frequency level.
Then you don't know if it's something that, like, you played in your mind or you've seen in a dream and you acted out at some point because you're comfortable with that action. I used to have a recurring dream when I was a kid, and it surfaced a lot. And now that we're in the future, it doesn't seem so far off. But I had this dream where I was in a car in the back seat with nobody driving, and the car would just take me into either a desert landscape or into a field of some sort. And I would get to that destination, and then the door would just open up. And as I'd get out, the dream would end. And this is a recurring dream. And now I'm like, okay, I got a Tesla. I can have my car drive me to a destination because it's going to be automated, at some point. And maybe that is how I end up, finishing my life, or if, that's maybe the end of the story or the beginning of a story. It's that surreal sense of like, okay, it can actually possibly happen, but there's something that can open up for me.
A whole lot of driving to places that you don't know where you're going.
Don't know yet. Yeah.
Isn't that the beauty of it though? Isn't that the best part to a certain degree?
Yeah, I mean, it's the mystery. It's the revealing, or putting the dots together at some point too.
Yeah.
We're like, oh my god, like, it made sense that I had to fall into this path to get to where I'm at today.
Mhm.
Sometimes you don't see it because it's either in chaos. I mean, just in general for everybody, like, you don't necessarily. It could seem like the worst moment too, and you look back and you're like, no, I had to actually go through that in order to get here where I'm at today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hindsight. And I hate to say it, but cliche of 2020, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the pandemic was a great thing to happen in a lot of ways. Like, I got back into painting again, and
Mm,
I'd also just focusing on me this time instead of dealing
mm,
with clients and investing in who I am. As if, I mean, everybody should at some point. I get that people have to have jobs and people want a career and things, but you really have to be able to pull back and get to know yourself and be comfortable with yourself, just to be able to move forward with things.
yeah. So, what do you feel is some of the attributes you have learned along the way that maybe you wish you'd have known before, or are key elements of who you are that drives you forward into that place of curiosity?
Well, I've been fortunate enough to know that my life is always going to be dedicated to making art since I was really young. Because I started drawing since I was about like 11 years old. I've been fortunate with that. I know it takes people lots of, a lot of time to figure out who they are, and I think just holding on to being creative or an artist kind of allowed me to move into different arenas. Like even in school, we didn't have to declare a major or a minor. It was just like you're part of this department, and if you want to go into another department, that's great. You can totally do that, and you end up incorporating things and um, merging two different types of creative mediums together. So, which I stick to medium, but like I feel like I've kind of gathered all these tools along the way to where I want to put them all to use. From
Mhm.
digital photography to video animation to physical objects. Maybe at some point I'll apply all of that together and kind of come up with something either genius or something that's just a conglomerate of everything that I've ever done in a way. I don't know. It can be a very hard process because I've learned, like even with my ceramic work, I do this very unique texture to the pieces, where I'm using a pen and a needle to create this effect of like a kind of like lava or coral. It's like a cross between both.
Yep.
And even though I love the look of it and the technique I developed with it, but sometimes I'm like, why the fuck did I come up with this technique? 'Cause this takes forever. It's so tedious. So for me, for me to be able to produce more of this work is just like it just makes the work even a lot harder.
Other than the ceramics and other than mixing all these mediums together, if you had to choose, what would be the one that you would choose? I know it's a hard question.
It's like, what food do you like? I don't stay. I don't know. I can't. It's like, who's your favorite child? I
Yes.
I can't necessarily say like what medium I want to stick with. I don't know. Yeah,
Can't pull it apart, huh?
can't pull it apart. I mean, painting I do love. It's great. I get to really just let things flow out, and ceramics. It's this feeling of creating something, like just molding something right away. And
Mhm.
digital art too. It's got, they all have their it it, well, digital art, I guess that kind of encompasses like all of it really, if you think about it. I mean, I
Mhm.
can do my painting, I can do my sculpting, I can do, but it's just not fully hands-on. Um, maybe in the VR world, I can explore that.
It's here sooner than we know. What do you feel your intentions are when you create art, be in any medium or even for a client? Because I know you do a lot of client work.
Mhm.
Granted, a client work is for an objective of what they have outlined, but when you do your own artwork and you're in your own element of creation, is there an intention behind it other than just fulfilling your need, I guess?
No, I think that's where like the line of being creative kind of comes in, is just I just channel it, and it's somewhat intuitive at some point where I'm like, okay, I'll start with something and I'll play with it and mold it, and then I'm like, oh, this would be cool if I did this to it. Because like honestly, even the golden rule, in the beginning when I started playing with it, I just had this like cool, landscape desert with the stars, and I started with that piece, and I started playing with making an object out of it, and I'm like, oh, this looks really cool. Like aesthetically, it looked great, but I was like, no, I want to do something more with it. And then I started playing with it, and I kind of got to this point where I'm like, okay, like this would be cool if I did this, and I don't want just one scene. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll have this thing grow. And the story just kind of grew along with it. And it's like clay. You start with a big ball of clay in a bag, and you got to like kind of pound it, and you got to massage it a little bit. And then it slowly just molds into its own piece. And it may not be perfect from the start. It's like doing a sketch. You kind of just, little by little, you start defining what it is. At some point when you're like, okay, like this isn't actually a piece now, and this tells a story, this has meaning to it, I identify with it. And now that's, how I pretty much want to move forward with most of my work. Before it was just like, oh, this is cool, or this is abstract imagery, or just even, just creating these symbols that I don't know, like I just let the canvas kind of make its painting in a way. I start with something blank, and even with painting too, you got to block things out, and and slowly, detail by detail, it just kind of comes together. And hopefully you have a message that you can identify with it. Or sometimes you get into a piece, and you pull back and you're like, oh shit, okay, this is what this means. This is the story behind it. It's like foretelling your coffee grinds in your tea,
Yep,
or
absolutely.
it's that little bit of that magic in there.
So ultimately, it comes with its own evolution, comes with its own growth. And every single time you go through that process, it's a maybe an aha at the end of it, but it's a little more insight. It's possibly a little something a little closer to you, into your definition of your legacy and your um, intention of why you created that piece.
Obviously, I'm gonna do things that I feel comfortable with, or I'm not gonna all of a sudden just throw this huge splash of color in there that's just random. I think you stay within a certain guideline. Sometimes, yeah, you just apply what you like. I mean, sometimes people get things from different imagery. I mean, the story. If I hadn't said anything, like, what would you walk away with? What would that story be for you? Would you
Mm,
would you come up with your own idea? Would Because I mean, the point is, if I could have an idea, hopefully it comes across, because I want that intention there. If somebody wants to interpret it into something they can identify with, that's just as great. Religion is pretty much almost the same way. We have our scriptures, and we have these stories, and we may not understand them unless we can identify with them to a certain degree.
that's the whole aspect of life, right?
So I mean, everyone's still searching for what's the point? Even
That's
my
right.
father, like, I mean, it's hard because he's older. And we were in the car driving, and he's like, there's one thing I want to ask God. And I was like, what's that? He's like, what's the point? Why do all this? Why are we, what's the meaning of all this? Like, and I know he's a thinker. I know he thinks a lot. Um, just growing up with him, he's never really been a great father figure, so to say. I mean, I hate to say it, but he's missed a lot of things in his life, that he should have picked up on, that he kind of just maybe doesn't acknowledge, or ignores, or doesn't feel comfortable with it. But he's got great grandchildren, and he is yet to like fight to go see them, or want to go see them. It saddens me because some people just don't either see their faults. And I think learning and acknowledging your faults when you're older, it's the real beauty of maybe why we're here. Maybe we have to learn those things in order to win the key to to the next life.
Yeah.
So
But isn't it also about perspective?
yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I may not understand his perspective, or I may not have gone through his experiences to know what it's like to have been him. So
Yeah. It's a journey in itself when you can observe and recognize other people having different experiences that you may have thought of, expected, or even welcomed or not. That whole realm in itself, I think, is so interesting. And it even more so when it's evoked from an external piece, like a piece of art or a piece of ceramic or something that somebody else envisioned and created, gives it a whole different depth and meaning of what it looks like from my lens. Be it the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, it depends how far you're operating. And even going back to our conversation earlier about the DNA, knowledge, wisdom is transferred through that DNA lineage. So sometimes it's activated in some situations and sometimes it isn't.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have dominance and recessive parts of us in general. So you may need a bunch of little things to kind of happen in order for you to pick up on those little minute things that the universe is telling you. So
Yeah, absolutely. What do you feel your calling is here?
mm. I love inspiring people to be creative and to look within themselves to kind of you know uh, have some of that magic because I don't know. I find beauty in that, being able to inspire somebody. There was this girl that told me that she got into doing graphic design because she used to look, over my shoulder in class, and I used to draw on the desk, and she like loved that, and it was really sweet, and I honored that she told me that I inspired her to kind of change her path in life. Um, there's a few people whose lives I've changed, and for the best, because I honestly want the best for people, and I'm not a malicious person. I'm genuinely, like, I believe to be a good character. I don't wish ill on people. I mean, there's some people that do suck. Yes. Um, I'll let the universe get to them, and
Right. So inspiring people.
yeah.
Do you inspire yourself when you look back and you see what you create and where you're going? Is there a cycle there within you?
Looking back at my previous works and to kind of feel like I'm gonna try and jump off where I left off. Yeah, I find inspiration in my own work. Sometimes I look back at my work, I'm like, oh, that's horrible. Like, why? That's that's not even great. Why did I think that was amazing? And that's great. I mean, it's fantastic when you could look back and see like, oh, I could do better, because that just means that you're getting better. Um,
Mm,
that's why I guess I like to keep my work around me too. It's to kind of keep me inspired on and me, you know, believing in myself and my work.
yeah. It's a good reminder to keep you on track and inspire you and to keep in touch with that, because as we know, day-to-day life can take us off track pretty quick. And not
Yeah,
to say you're not dedicated to your craft, but often it can, well, from my experience, it can take us off track because we get roped into or engrossed in other experiences and other things that need to be taken care of, that limits the time and commitment to something else.
true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I do have things that are life distracting, from either being client work or even having to deal with my father's business as well, and family. I mean, those are my big distractions. Um,
Mm,
but I there are things that I have to, be responsible for in life. I can't just jump off and be like, all right, screw everybody. That's not me. I kind of have to have a little bit of loyalty.
yeah.
Client work, that's the only thing I could probably be like, all right, bye. But even then, it's the same thing. It's like just making sure I'm just staying creative, I guess, because I could get a commission piece, and that to me right there can just also seem like it's working for somebody else. I mean, it's still my
Right.
own message, and it's still what I get to create, but it's the demand of being under somebody else's thumb, kind of.
Yeah. Even though we have these external column distractions, they're also blessings, because then you can look at life and go, this is what I truly love. Because we have such a contrast. What we really enjoy doing, but what we need to do is I think such a magical gift. I think we can live through.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. I do need these things in my life to kind of keep my work going as well.
Yeah,
Is you know they they financially help me stay independent.
of course. Yes, ultimately we need those elements to keep us supported, so we can do those things that feed our soul, that feed our heart, and feed the other elements of us that make us thrive, and go to that reflective space of, what does this legacy look like? What is my existence and being looking like? What am I doing here? What
Yeah,
else brings me joy? All those big grand questions that come with age, I think.
yeah, yeah. Because even when I was younger, I always thought to myself like, oh, I better make this piece look amazing because hopefully one day it'll be in a museum. And
Funny.
you know, kind of had that in the beginning of my career, and now I'm just like, no, I just want to be more authentic. Um,
Yes.
so and realizing, yes, there is an end. Um, so you have to accept it because it's a train that has a destination. So
Yeah, here we go down that death trail again. Okay, so what does the next little while look like for you? You've done and experienced so much, and still evolving and still changing and still growing, but what does this next little leg look like for you? What's your inspiration? Where do you go from here?
well, I'm going to be focusing more on my genetic work and trying to explore, I guess, more of that science and uh, doing more research as well and into other things, I guess, that we don't necessarily see up front. I think digging a little more deeper in scientifically and a little more surrealism, I guess. So I'm just moving this train forward.
This has been such a great conversation in learning more about you, your thought process, and where you want to go next, and your evolution in who you are. A little bit more background. What brings you to this point to create the pieces of art? Have these insightful conversations and reflective ones, not only through your art, but also through Clubhouse as well. So I want to thank you for your time and your energy and sharing. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you for having me. It means a lot to me that you wanted to do this. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm Naranjan, and you've been listening to Master of Your Crafts podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and join me next week for another episode. Thank you for listening.